On this Tuesday night, winter wallop. Millions of Canadians in the path of a brutal blast of weather.
We've already got our flight delayed.
The warnings of what's on the way. Donald Trump's legal fight.
I think it's very unfair.
Why he believes he should have sweeping immunity from prosecution. Breaking news, Ecuador's state of emergency. As a gang leader vanishes from his prison cell, armed groups take police officers and journalists hostage. And springing into action.
It's just amazing to me that they did this.
The Canadian teenagers who saved a couple from drowning.
Global National with Dawna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The new year is starting with a punch of winter weather. Storm warnings are in effect for large parts of Ontario, Quebec and the Maritimes. Some areas are bracing for up to 20 centimeters of snow along with ice pellets and freezing rain. Canada's capital is caught in it. Blowing snow making driving conditions in Ottawa tricky and causing flight delays and cancellations there. At Toronto's Pearson Airport, maintenance crews were hard at work clearing the tarmac this morning as wet snow fell across the region. That snow later turned to slush, making for a messy evening commute. Global News meteorologist Anthony Farnell is watching it all for us. Anthony, it's pretty wet there right now, but give us the big picture.
Dawna, wintry for much of Canada, but here in southern Ontario, it continues to be a battle between winter and whatever this is. The rain pouring down on me. Everything that fell this morning has turned into slush, and that is problematic on the roads across the region for the evening commute. The snow remains rather heavy as you go north and east. The Ottawa Valley into southern Quebec. 15 to 30 centimeters expected, along with the risk of freezing rain. This entire system is headed towards the Maritimes, where it's not just snow and rain, but also wind that is going to cause some problems, including power outages. Gusts on Wednesday could top 100 kilometers per hour. Now, this system doesn't have much cold air on the backside, so it's not going to be a flash freeze, but there will be more cold available for the next one. In BC, big waves, mountain snow, that low will intensify as it moves down to Texas and takes a very similar track up the East Coast. So it may be a repeat performance for areas from the Great Lakes through eastern Canada Friday into the upcoming weekend. Very active weather and very cold air behind that system. Dawna?
Okay, Global News meteorologist Anthony Farnell, thanks. And this is what that weather is doing in Western Canada right now. Wind warnings are in effect for parts of coastal BC. BC's interior is getting slammed with heavy snow, creating treacherous driving conditions. Alberta and Saskatchewan are also bracing for heavy snow, and parts of northern Alberta could dip to minus 40 degrees with the wind chill. In the U.S., hundreds of thousands of people are without power as an intense storm moves across the central and eastern parts of that country. Heavy snow and blizzard conditions have caused travel chaos in parts of the Midwest and Northeast. According to the flight tracking website Flight Aware, more than 1,700 flights have been canceled. In the southeast, high winds and heavy rain have caused severe damage, and at least 2 people have been reported killed. Lawyers for former U.S. President Donald Trump are arguing he should be immune from prosecution for his coup attempt in 2020 when he tried to overturn the results of the election. A panel of federal appeals judges will decide if the criminal charges against him should be thrown out. At one point today, a judge asked Trump's lawyer this hypothetical question.
Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached, would he be subject to criminal prosecution?
If he were impeached and convicted first. And
so your answer is no.
My answer is qualified yes.
Trump is facing 4 criminal counts related to his effort to remain in office after he lost. Jackson Proskow explains why this case is so important.
He didn't need to appear in court. Donald Trump came to Washington anyway to watch his legal team argue he should be immune from prosecution for his attempts to overturn the 2020 election.
A president has to have immunity. And the other thing is I did nothing wrong.
Before a panel of 3 judges, Trump's lawyers argued he can only be prosecuted for official acts if he's first impeached and convicted by Congress.
To authorize the prosecution of a president for his official acts would open a Pandora's box from which this nation may never recover.
The Justice Department warned giving Trump absolute immunity would open the door to abuse of power by future presidents.
Never in our nation's history until this case has a president claimed that immunity from criminal prosecution extends beyond his time in office.
More importantly, the DOJ argued election interference was not part of Trump's job as president.
Committing fraud, trying to overturn a legitimate election, or even campaigning, courts have historically held that that is outside the scope of one's official duties.
The immunity question is at the heart of whether special counsel Jack Smith's case against Trump can proceed. For now, the trial is on hold. An expected appeal to the Supreme Court could delay it further.
I think everyone sort of has this strong desire to move past this and to get these allegations resolved. So I don't think it's a sure thing that the Supreme Court actually takes the case even after the D.C. Circuit rules.
Trump has already been indicted by a grand jury on 4 counts of conspiracy and obstruction. This is the first of several court appearances for Trump that run right up against the 2024 presidential campaign calendar. But Trump has shown he has no problem using his legal woes as campaign events.
You think anybody else could get up here and speak to you all day and get indicted 4 times?
For Trump, a return to the presidency may be his last best hope for escaping his troubles with the law. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
We are watching events in Ecuador tonight, where an armed conflict is underway after a powerful gang leader disappeared from his prison cell and other inmates escaped. Tonight, hooded armed men stormed a TV studio during a live broadcast. The men waved guns and what appeared to be explosives before the live feed cut out. It is one of a series of what seems to be coordinated attacks across the South American country, including the kidnapping of at least 7 police officers. Ecuador is now under a state of emergency.
Y precisas a los mandos militares y policiales.
Ecuador's president has ordered the armed forces to neutralize 24 gangs, which he's described as terrorist organizations, and has deployed more than 3,000 police and military officers. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is back in Israel, repeating his message that the toll on civilians in Gaza is far too high and that more food, water, and medicine needs to get into Gaza. So far, U.S. pressure on Israel to ease up its siege has not changed things on the ground. Blinken also called for a clear pathway to a Palestinian state, something Israel's neighbors support, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu does not. Crystal Goomansingh reports.
As the intense Israeli campaign aimed at preventing another October 7th-style attack continues, America's top diplomat says Israel's security is tied to security for Palestinians.
As I told the Prime Minister, every partner that I met on this trip said that they're ready to support a lasting solution that ends the long-running cycle of violence and ensures Israel's security. But they underscored that this can only come through a regional approach that includes a pathway to a Palestinian state.
Nice to see you.
Anthony Blinken, who met with several key Israeli leaders as a part of a regional tour, announced a UN team would be granted access to the north of Gaza to assess when and how civilians can return home. While that work isn't expected to happen soon, Israel's foreign ministry is dismissing plans suggested by some lawmakers to resettle displaced Gazans to African nations. Those who fled to the south still live under constant threat. The UN says 80% of Gaza's population has been displaced, and more than 90% face acute food insecurity, a reality understood by even the youngest in Gaza. The situation is very tragic, says this 8-year-old. We are asking all states to send aid, open the Rafah border crossing to get all the aid in, to end the war. Blinken also called for the war to end as soon as possible. But 95 days into this conflict, attacks between the IDF and Hezbollah have reignited fears the war could expand to Lebanon. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Here at home, special immigration measures kicked in today, allowing Canadians to apply for temporary safe haven for family members trapped in Gaza. The federal government calls it a humanitarian pathway for those looking to flee Gaza. Though, as Heidi Petracek reports, applying is not easy and there is no guarantee of success.
The wait is excruciating.
And we're just on hold.
Lena Sakala got up at midnight to see if the application process to get extended family members out of Gaza had opened up. At noon, still nothing.
I'm very mad because it took Canada so long for them to open up such a program.
Ottawa announced the temporary special immigration measures December 21st. The Sakalas hope it will help them bring 10 loved ones to Canada for up to 3 years, including Ari Sakala's sister, who once slept here before bombing forced her into a tent. The Sakalas say roughly 100 relatives have already been killed in the humanitarian crisis.
They are just in one place and suddenly they have a rocket in the home and all of them died.
The government plan caps applications at 1,000 in a country with an estimated 45,000 Palestinian Canadians.
Consider the fact that most of them have loved ones stuck in Gaza.
And immigration lawyers say the complex application process places a heavy burden on those bringing relatives in.
They have to provide a notarized statement confirming that they will financially support their loved ones from Gaza for a period of at least 1 year.
Limits and conditions, Marcoux says, didn't exist for others fleeing conflict from Ukraine or Afghanistan.
Can I do it from this app, from this computer? Yeah. No, this computer.
By mid-afternoon, the online application portal went live and the scramble began. If they get in under the cap, the application has to be approved. And even then, Ottawa says there is no guarantee clearing that hurdle will mean clearing the Rafah border.
I just have to sit and watch my loved ones being killed by bombing or starvation or diseases.
With no timeline yet on when families could be reunited. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Police in Quebec are investigating an attack inside a courthouse in Longueuil, south of Montreal. A 68-year-old man was attacked with a sharp weapon this afternoon. He's in hospital in serious condition. A 43-year-old man has been arrested and could face attempted murder charges. Police say the victim and the suspect do not know each other. The Quebec government has announced a $300 million plan to help students catch up after a teachers' strike. Hundreds of thousands of students return today after more than a month out of class. Schools will be able to use the provincial money to organize tutoring for students, and the help will be voluntary and offered outside of regular school hours. People in BC will soon be the first in Canada to have access to a self-screening test for cervical cancer, hoping it will detect cancer sooner. At-home test kits will be available to order online or over the phone and will screen for HPV, the leading cause of cervical cancer. The province says the test is quick, easy, and more accurate than Pap tests, the traditional method of testing. Houston, we have a problem coming up. Why NASA is delaying 2 missions to the moon.
Coming up on 60 seconds into the flight, everything looking good.
Well, it went from looking good to looking like mission impossible for the first U.S. moon lunar lander in over half a century. Peregrine 1 developed a critical fuel leak hours after liftoff yesterday. Astrobotic, the private company behind the project, now says there is no chance of a soft landing on the moon and says the spacecraft will run out of propellant in less than 40 hours. The lander is carrying NASA scientific equipment along with human remains of former presidents and space enthusiasts. NASA is working with Astrobotic to identify the root cause of the propulsion issue and says space is hard. Space is also dangerous, and today NASA announced its planned missions to the moon will be delayed because of safety and technical issues. Mackenzie Gray explains what's happened and what's next.
This was the walk Canadian Jeremy Hansen and 3 other astronauts were supposed to take later this year on their way to circle the moon. But in Houston, NASA has a problem.
We are facing challenges, both technical and just dealing with going back to the moon.
Artemis is the name of the missions to the moon, and the upcoming launch has been pushed back from November of this year until September 2025.
I was a bit surprised how much later it was going to be, about a 10-month pushback.
When there is liftoff, it will almost certainly make history. The 10-day mission around the moon will potentially go farther into space than any human has ever traveled. But NASA is facing multiple issues to make that happen. Life support hardware and electrical systems that allow the crew to pull away from the capsule in case of emergency both failed in testing. That's on top of battery issues in the Orion spacecraft, which the crew will fly around the moon in.
The NASA people kept saying safety, safety, safety is because these really are all safety things. And yeah, NASA has it in their mandate to do really cool science and space things and not kill anybody in the process.
I think I'm definitely disappointed.
That cool science, aided by Canadian geologist Gordon Osinski, who's been training the crew on what they could find on the far side of the moon, a place humans have never gone.
We're going to a part of the moon that we don't see from the Earth. And so it's kind of tucked around on the lower part of the moon, the South Polar region.
The man dubbed Dr. Crater is hoping moon rocks and water can be brought back for further analysis.
I'll be participating in Artemis 3 when those first humans step back on the surface of the moon is really exciting. And if I have to wait another year for that, then, so be it.
If the Artemis 3 mission to land on the moon is successful in late 2026, it will be the first time since 1972, Dawna, that humans have been on the moon.
I remember that, of course. Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thanks. Still ahead, Earth records its hottest year ever. Investigators are trying to figure out what reduced part of this hotel in Fort Worth, Texas, to rubble. An explosion Monday injured at least 21 people and scattered debris onto the streets. Authorities suspect a gas leak is to blame, but are still searching for evidence. Well, it's not a surprise, yet it is deeply troubling. It is now confirmed 2023 was the hottest year in recorded history and likely the hottest in 100,000 years. Records were shattered by significant amounts. Data from the Copernicus Climate Change Service shows every day of 2023 was at least 1 degree Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures. And for nearly half those days, global daily temperatures exceeded 1.5 degrees. The El Nino weather cycle was a factor, but only a small one. And as Redmond Shannon reports, climate scientists warn the burning of fossil fuels will keep driving temperatures up.
Last year's 6,500 wildfires across Canada burned a total area more than 3 times that of Nova Scotia. A staggering record-breaking year of fires, much of them and many other extreme weather events fueled by the planet's hottest average temperatures since records began, and likely long before that.
There were simply no cities, no books, agriculture, or domesticated animals on this planet last time the temperature was so high.
The European Union's Copernicus climate change report shows how in the early part of the year, temperatures were already trending well above the previous 30-year average. But then from June, they were turbocharged. Just look at Canada. The suddenness of the spike was partly due to the El Nino cycle in the Pacific. But experts say the records are mostly the result of human-generated emissions.
It would be impossible to explain this peak in global mean temperature without climate change. So climate change has been definitely a driver.
The report says the Earth was 1.48 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels last year, almost at the 1.5 threshold of the Paris Climate Agreement, although that would only be breached by temperatures across a 20-year average. The report also contains a list of staggering statistics. Just look at how the decades have gotten warmer, and then look at 2023.
It was the first time on record that every day within a year had exceeded 1 degree above that pre-industrial average.
Sea ice is at or close to record lows, water temperatures at record highs. This year could be warmer again. Scientists say it depends on El Nino's peak. But putting that aside,
it's basically certain that the average temperature over the next 5 years will be warmer than the average temperature over the last 5 years.
Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
South Korea has passed legislation banning the production and sale of dog meat. The bill aims to end a centuries-old practice that's increasingly unpopular. The law will make slaughtering, breeding, and sales of dog meat for human consumption illegal and punishable by 2 to 3 years in prison. The ban will go into effect by 2027. Hailed as heroes. Next, how these Montreal teenagers turned into lifesavers. They were in the right place at the right time, and they jumped into action. Two teenagers from Montreal saved a British couple who were struggling in the ocean off Barbados. Amanda Jelowicki reports on the split-second decision they made that ended up saving lives.
Emma Basserman and Zoe McClensick Ireland had just finished boogie boarding together in Barbados. They were leaving the beach when they saw a woman struggling.
I went out to her, and she told me that her husband was further out and he was struggling to swim.
Emma, 14, and Zoe, 13, are both experienced swimmers. Emma is with the Dorval swim team, training for Olympic trials. Zoe's father is the coach. With no lifeguards around, the girls sprang to action.
The undertow that day was pretty strong.
But the woman's husband was flailing in the water, about 150 feet from shore. They grabbed a boogie board and, without hesitating, swam out to help.
He was trying to swim, but we could tell that he was struggling.
They put him on the board, tied it to Zoe's ankle, and then swam for all their lives.
It was a pretty long and tiring swim, I'd say, just because we were also pulling him too.
I didn't want to show them that I was scared because I would make them even more worried about our safety and their own.
With the man safe, news spread quickly about the girls' heroic actions.
I'm so proud of both of them. And I think they don't realize how much this means. They've saved, lives to come in here. It could have been way worse.
I think that we both handled it extremely well, and we did what we needed to help them.
The girls have a few more days of vacation before returning to Montreal as real-life heroes. Amanda Jelowicki, Global News, Montreal.
Wow, so strong and composed. That is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Dawna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the Peace Bridge in Calgary. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.